So guys, I want to tell you guys a quick story. You know, I'm a historian, so I study history around here. I feel like if you don't know history, you don't really know yourself. So I pride myself in studying history because I'm from here, so I think I should know everything about here. Do you guys know how the city was actually incorporated? The city of Miami? How the city was incorporated, how it came about. Do you know that this city was the first city to be incorporated, the first and only city to be incorporated by a woman in the United States? The only in the first city. Julia Tuttle was her name. Have you heard of the name? Exactly. So Julia Tuttle, she traveled to Miami from Ohio back in the 1800s. So this was like 1880s. She came to Florida. She fell in love just like everybody else. As soon as she got here, she loved it, never wanted to move back. So, but before then, you know, it was a swampland here. It's pretty much a swampland, right? Just imagine back in the 1800s, the late 1800s, how many trees were here. There was no roads or anything like that. Okay, so it was really swampy. So what she did is she decided to come down. Her husband had recently passed. She had so much land. She actually owned over 750 acres of the city of Miami. So where the city sits at, where the police station and everything, all of that was Julia Tuttle's land. So 750 acres is extremely large. And she was by herself. So you can imagine a woman in her 40s, early 50s, with almost 800 acres of land, no husband. She was just super bored. And guess who her neighbors was?
How much you pay at that time?
I don't know. No. I'll tell you the story about Carl Fisher too. But with that being said, she was by herself. Her neighbor was actually William and Mary Brickell. Ring a bell, right? Yeah. All right then. So yes, it rings a bell. Okay, so Mary Brickell, and Mary Brickell was actually the first developer in the city of Miami too. Exactly. So you see where the river is at? The river. So Julia Tuttle house was right here on the river, and the Brickell family house was right across the river. So they owned everything where Brickell was at, downtown, all of that. That was all the Brickell side of the family. That was their residence. Back in the 1800s. The city was actually incorporated back in 1896. Okay? So how she did it, the mystery was this. She went and got a tycoon. His name was Henry Flagler. And do anybody know the history of Flagler? Railroads, exactly. The Florida East Coast Railway. Yes. That same railroad right there off Biscayne, off US 1, is the same railroad back from 200, 100, whatever years ago. It's the same exact railroad, okay? So he built that, but before he built that, Julia Tuttle had to convince him to actually come down to Miami. He was an older guy, he didn't care. He was like, his wife died, he didn't want to be in Miami, but he was trying to escape the code.
Yes, don't blame him.
Exactly. So when Henry Flagler, his wife was dying, she was a little older and she couldn't take the code. So he relocated to St. Augustine. Okay? So he relocated to St. Augustine, and eventually she passed away. So he was there. So he was just around. So what happened was Julia Tuttle tried to get him to come to Miami, but he ignored her for years. He was like, "Lady, you're crazy. Leave me alone. I'm gonna take my money, you leave me alone, lady." But after I think it was the Great Freeze back in like 1895, what it was that all the crops in Florida was destroyed. Everything, overnight. Anybody that was in the citrus business, anybody that was any business, it was all gone overnight. But then Julia Tuttle sent them a package. And when she sent them a package, it had some citruses, flowers and certain things, floral package. And the package was still very much warm. It wasn't frozen. So he took that as an indication that, hey, we might need to go to this city called Miami. And they came down to Miami. But at the time, it was called Fort Dallas. It was Fort Dallas because, after the war, the Spain, it was a military base first, and then it converted to the city of Miami. But again, let's go back. She brought him here, and when he came here, he decided on the very first day when he got here, he seen the weather, he looked around, he saw how the vibe was, and then he decided, you know what? Bring the train. And that's how the train got to Miami. So the next step was for them to incorporate the actual city. And they had to sit in a meeting on Julia Tuttle's house. It was about 300 men that voted. The crazy thing about this is that she could not vote.
Right.
And it was her house.
Right.
It was her property. She owned all the land around it. But because she was a woman,
Yeah.
and you talk back in the 1800s where women couldn't speak,
Right.
she couldn't choose to vote the city in or incorporate or anything like that. But eventually the gentlemen there, they did it, and they incorporated the city, and now we're in the great city of Miami. So that's the short overview of how the city was actually incorporated. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you.
Then to a woman.
Yes, hands up to a woman. If it wasn't for this woman, we wouldn't be here right now.
Power of woman and the vision.
The power of woman.
Like always.
Not only that, she had to literally court this man
She had,
aggressively.
No, I know.
but he was an older gentleman, so it probably was, she was doing this for years.
But I'm saying for him to not see the business vision.
At first, but he was with his wife. He was an older gentleman. But you understand, he was already like a billionaire back in the 1800s. If you don't know about Henry Flagler,
Swamps right now.
Flagler was he was the reason